So when you start Gen 25, your whole aim is equality for everyone, right? Social inclusion for everyone, political rights for everyone, everybody. People, rights for those who you disagree with, right? And I remember at the time there was this drive to to label people as filul, right? And it was interesting because it came from this notion that's like, okay, so everybody who was in the Mubarak NDP is filul. You're like, okay, fine. And then it's like everybody who was in the Mubarak government is filul. Fine. Okay, I can see the argument. Everybody who was a businessman or who made money during the Mubarak days because they benefit from Mubarak, they're filul. And all of the asabiyat or qabiliyat, all of the big families, all of the tribes, all of whatever, all of them are filul. At which point you're like, okay, time out, hold on. So who isn't filul? Because you just mentioned 80% of the country, right? And this at the time, the idea was like, we want to ban those people. You're not really banning anyone, and you can't really ban anyone, and you cannot claim to be for rights when you're talking about banning your political opponents, and you cannot be for freedom of speech if you're not willing to listen to other opposing points of views and stuff like that. But the people who are pushing this narrative, right, and it's a narrative that at the beginning I was kind of part of, but after when it went crazy, I didn't. Were the ones with the shrillest voices, and this is when you start recognizing when you're dealing with online movements, right? The fastest way for you to gain prominence is to, be the shrillest voice possible, right? This is all you need to do. You need to take the most extreme position. You need to accuse everybody else of selling out. And this is how you become, the golden boy of the revolution, the person who, has the revolution's, stamp of approval. You are a real revolutionary. You're not a real revolutionary. You're a opposer. You're a liar. You're, right? And when you do this, when you're dealing with something that requires big social change, right? You're dealing with many different groups of people with many different belief structures. They might agree with you on some elements, not really, whatever. But in order for you to in order for you to reach the future, I think, you can never really build the future. The only way for us to build the future is together. And that requires dialogue. And that requires people talking to each other, not yelling at each other. That requires people to have nuance in their ideas. That requires people to understand that, you cannot push for big changes without actually, getting buy-in and support and building social different alliances all over the place, right? And that even if it's good to have, those non-compromising extremist people, they cannot be the only people because they are your stick. And next to the stick, you need a carrot. You need those who are able to communicate and talk and build alliances, whatever. And those two sides have to be working with each other. You're right. I cannot be the person who does the negotiating and be attacked by the person who is taking the extreme position. That's not how it works. This is us fighting amongst ourselves and not really reaching anything, right? It turns compromise into a dirty word instead of the thing that we all need. It makes everything into a zero-sum game, while in reality, yes, zero-sum games are great because you could win everything, but you could also lose everything, right? And this is the thing most people don't understand. Most people not willing to accept. So such divisions, right, within the social fabric, continued. Even today, even in specific, and amplified, I think. If you compare the environment of 2011 to the environment of today, 2011 used to have far more nuance. It used to have so many more different voices, so many different more points of views. People were actually engaged in debates. Now we don't engage in debates. Now we don't have nuance. Now we don't have any of that. You are either with us or against us, And it's interesting because it comes from this is the same rhetoric that used to be considered right-wing when Bush employed it. Yet somehow you're seeing it adapted. A lot of I don't want to say left-wing activists, but left-wing causes that are more carried by left-wing people, right? Yet they are using right-wing tactics, and specifically with newer generations, right? suddenly, if you're the kind of person...
I think at some point you're going to have to disassociate the right-wing and left-wing rhetoric and just say these are authoritarian tactics being taken by a left-wing activist, for example. These labels are sort of becoming misnomers, I think, in recent times. That's just an opinion.
No, I don't disagree with you, but it's also like, it's a nice way to say fascist.
Yeah.
Because you do have, like, you're constantly shocked by how many people that, have fascist tendencies. Like, specifically when they have spent so many years, like, actually taking point of views that were not that, right? But we're dealing with a new age, it seems, like that in which freedom of speech is not appreciated. You cannot have freedom of speech. You cannot have freedom of association. You cannot have innocence till proven guilty. None of that stuff, exists anymore. Now it's more towards shrillness and extremism, because that same lesson that people have learned in 2011, those voices that wanted to gain social capital and currency by being extreme, by holding that position, having that influence, that is the one lesson that the younger generation has learned, right? That actually, like, the more extreme you are, the more this you are, the more that you are. So it becomes problematic. It becomes problematic, even when you're trying to enact social changes that you believe in. Like, for example, if we're dealing with, let's say, women's rights movement in Egypt, all for women's rights, all for equality, all for feminism. Yes, 100%. Right? And then you have people who are like, oh, we shouldn't have the opinion of men. We don't need another man's opinion on this or that. Or like, if a man who agrees but seems to have a criticism regarding anything, maybe an approach or a tactic or whatever, immediately, they can be labeled, whatever they're saying, they can be labeled as, oh, this is no different than the people who do this, or the misogynists who do that, or the patriarch who do this, and it's like, sure, okay, ignore them if you want. If you want to ignore the people that are on your side, be my guest. But we have seen it happen in Jan 25. We have seen something that the supreme majority of the country agree with being turned into, like, a minority group. Right? So instead of, like, being the big, great change in the culture and whatever, this led to us becoming something very, very secluded, a ghetto of ideas, of people, of a community, which isn't where you want to go. So the question that any such movement that wants to do this in the future becomes, do you actually want to enact change, right? So social change, or do you just want to be the person in control of a minority group? Right? And anybody who takes the group within that direction is someone that is more interested in their power than actual change, to someone who is more driven, maybe even driven by trauma than actual rational thinking, and who's not really interested in having a world in which that change that they have been advocating for it happen, as much as they're interested in being known as one of the people pushing for it, even if they're not really pushing for it, And those people, I consider them con artists. Like, most of the time, like, you're either dealing with people who are mentally unstable, right? People who are traumatized, or people who are con artists or in it for the influence and the power, or people who are pushed by the states.
The only caveat I would add to what you're saying is that I do feel in Egypt this is an obvious statement that we've reached a point where people don't feel they have any power to make any change. So they would then be more interested in attacking and building social capital. And you would...
Well, yeah, but it's also like,
I'm not saying that's a reason to do it, but...
back in the day, there used to be the idea of who's on your side and who's on the other side, right? Who are you attacking, who are you not attacking? Who's your ally, right? And who isn't your ally? And the idea of an ally back in the day meant that is the classical version of ally, right? Which is that we have a common goal. We don't necessarily have to agree on everything. We can agree on certain things and we can move things forward in that regard.
Yeah.
Now, ally is more, you're either 100% believer in everything that we believe in,
and
like adopt everything that we believe in. It's more religious.
Yeah,
right.
And January 25th, I mean, like 25, it was celebrated, the square, as this place where people with radically different views could come together for a goal. If you had the attitude you're talking about now, you could argue that those people wouldn't want to stand next to each other because they would immediately dismiss the person next to them as not having the exact same agenda. Like, how can an Islamist stand next to a liberal, secular individual fighting for change in this type of atmosphere?
Right, but that is the question, right? What is it that you want? Do you want democracy, or do you don't want democracy? Because if you want democracy is a system in which nobody is happy, because nobody gets their way.
Yeah.
But we all can live together, right? A society that's big enough for all of us. If you want a society that works for you or that just echoes you, then you are a kind of person who doesn't really care about other people. You actually have more authoritarian, things in your vein than you're willing to admit. If you want to just dismiss people or dehumanize them or whatever, ban them or whatever it is that you want to do. And, I'm always very confused. Why are you in the opposition? Join the state. Oppress people that disagree with you. Enjoy it. Use punitive measures. Be my guest, But also, there is this other issue, which is Jan 25 has been traumatic. Right? So a lot of people, a lot of voices that have been operating throughout Jan 25 were dealing with daily traumas, right? Every single day, every single week, you had 4 or 5 traumatic events, right? People that, whatever. And none of us at the time recognized that we were traumatized. None of us recognized that maybe the decisions that we're making or taking, is it making a decision? Take a decision. When we're traumatized might not be the most logical decisions to make. They're not the ones that we should move forward with, and you see this now. You see this kind of lack of awareness now. People back then, towards the 3rd year or the 4th year, started trauma bonding with each other, in which mind you is a term for a manipulative tactic. When an abuser wants to manipulate someone, they trauma bond with them. But when it's happening in terms of a community, that's when things start getting really, really, really problematic. Because number one, it does open up a lot of room for people to abuse and manipulate you within those groups. But more importantly, it creates your sensitive identity and community very much related to that trauma. So nobody's really interested, or nobody really thinks about how do I get my mind out of this place? How do I heal? How do I do this? You have camaraderie, you have community, and everybody tells you it's okay, so it's okay. We all accept each other, all us being traumatized and triggered all the time. Yes, you should never feel ashamed for being traumatized. You should never feel ashamed for being triggered. But you should definitely understand that this is not the normal state of things, that is not good for your mental health, and that it's a problem that requires you to actually work on to improve, to return to a more mentally healthy and stable environment, and make decisions such as that. But instead, you end up in this situation which, if it's that connected to community, if that's connected to identity, if that's connected to social following, and this is the only place in which you can fit in within the country that you're in, because you belong to a group that has managed to alienate everyone, instead of actually build alliances and increase their size, whatever, then you're just not interested. It's not even provided you as an option.
I do wonder what the overall effect is of having a country where you had 3 traumas a week happening, inflicted on a population for 2-3 years, and now you're in a situation where you're supposed to act like that period didn't happen, so you can't even properly reflect on it.
Well, yeah, there is that, but 100%. But there's also the trauma of living in Egypt since 2016. I was one of the fortunate ones that could travel coming back and forth, so that actually helped, right? But if you're sincere since 2016 nonstop, then you have dealt with loss of wealth, on a huge level. Your money no longer is worth much, and and the prices kept increasing. Life continued becoming harder. Injustices increased. Issues, what I'm saying? It just kept on and on and on, trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma after trauma, just living here every single day. You try to go from point A to point B, we're talking about anxiety of living in Cairo. The main anxiety you have in Cairo is the streets. getting from point A to point B. That is literally the problem. Like, inside the houses were great. Outside Cairo were lovely. On the street in Cairo, it's like, kill me now. I'm exhausted.
Hey, your neighborhood in Heliopolis has a lot more bridges, so we're moving faster.
Oh, you mean the Heliopolis Junction? It's not a neighborhood anymore.
Yeah, the Heliopolis Junction.
Yeah, it's a junction.
So they solved one problem, but they created another.
No. As far as we understand, as far as I can understand social media and people I talk to, the most important problem in Egypt is traffic, right? And it is number one consideration. Right? Us not having traffic. It's more important than beauty. It is more important than urban planning. It's more important than oxygen. It's more important than greenery. It's more important than anything. Right? And if that is not trauma talking, I don't know what it is. Right? And this is the thing that nobody has learned. For all of their talk about mental health and this and that and like all of this awareness that happens, it's not true. It's all of, it's kind of like how Egyptians are religious. It's the same way. It comes from the same place, I think, in which every person will tell you that they have memorized the Quran, but they cannot but somehow they never internalize the values, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's the one place in which you find people become more religious, but they treat each other worse. Right? It becomes more about identity and presentation, right? Than it is about what's happening inside, right? And that is, that's when you know that it's not that those people are fake, but that they have been hollowed out. They have been destroyed. There has been destruction. There has been some sort of, what's it called? They're like broke, they're like emotionally broke or intellectually broke or even ethically broke. They claim to stand and espouse values that they don't actually have or can actually enact in real life. They cannot, they don't even offer an alternative to the social norms that they criticize. You dislike society, how it works. Your society think it's sick, it's whatever, fine, all right. Then within your little ghetto of your friends or whatever, how are you guys dealing with each other, right? Have you created new ways? Have you looked at the way we treat each other in society that you object to and somehow changed it? And this is not happening. Instead, for example, I grew in a generation which every female that I've known had at some point had to deal with a decision that she has to make, and her mother told her, what would people say? Right? What would the people say to me? How would I, whatever, people will deal with, they'll talk about this, they'll do this, they'll do that, whatever. They're they'll shame you. Heklu الشنا and whatever. Right? So they all rebelled against it. And then they went and created the little community in which now with cancel culture, it's the same fucking idea. You cannot be friends with this person because everybody else will look at you and be like, how could you? What would people say? How could you associate with this person? How could you know this person? How could you say this in front of those people? How could you? Yanhar Iswad. Right? So, and this is the point in which, it all
comes back to our moms, man.
Right?
That's why you became a blogger.
Mommy issues, daddy issues, mommy issues, but internalization, right? You cannot talk about internalized misogyny in men without talking about internalized misogyny in women. And you cannot claim that women who disagree with you have internalized misogyny, because if everybody has internalized misogyny, then everybody has internalized misogyny. That means that there are certain things, you little who accused others of internalized misogynistic parts of you as well. Maybe not in ideas, but maybe in action. Maybe you mimic it. Maybe you become that you have always objected to. And that is the one thing I think that people never learned, which is that we are a society, and society means many, many people that don't agree with each other, and we need to find a way to actually cohabitate, agree, discuss, and move forward. Because otherwise, we're not going to go anywhere.